Josh Spencer was a cleaner at a 5-star New York restaurant when he was caught taking leftover food home to feed his sick son. When the chef discovered what had happened, he humiliated the cleaner in front of everyone and threatened to fire him. However, just 2 weeks later, everyone there began working for him. Josh exhaled a sigh of relief as he finished washing the last dish and placed it on the table. It had been a long day, and the man was exhausted from juggling so many tasks. Most days, there weren't as many dirty dishes, but the restaurant was celebrating that day, so Josh's workload increased noticeably. However, it was not only this that made him sweat from working so hard, but also the dirty floor of the restaurant that he had to clean every day after work, making his job as a cleaner take up almost all of his time for the day. Josh was about to leave when he noticed a tray of dishes that the customers had returned. The food was intact and looked fresh and delicious, as if no one had touched it. Josh paused for a moment before deciding to take the food home with him. Well, I guess it wouldn't hurt anyone if I ate some of that food, right? It's already paid for, and I doubt anyone else will notice. Josh muttered to himself, attempting to reassure himself. He'd only been working at the restaurant for a few months and was still getting used to the untouched food returning to the kitchen. Josh had no idea why the customers refused to eat their order, which appeared to be delicious. However, it happened almost every day. Besides, the chef, Mr. Edwards, did not like it when someone got in his way, so Josh decided to accept that this was none of his business and ignore such situations, focusing solely on cleaning up and washing the dishes that were piling up in the sink. Mr. Edwards was an imposing and powerful man who ruled the kitchen with an iron fist and ruthlessness. He was in charge of purchasing the ingredients needed to prepare the main courses on the menu. Josh gently placed the abandoned, untouched plate in a bag to take home because his shift was over. The unintentional thief had no idea he was stealing or breaking any rules. After all, that food would have ended up in the trash regardless, so Josh's decision to take it home made no difference. However, it turned out that he was gravely mistaken. Josh had 2 kids at home who were probably starving by this time of night, so he said goodbye to a coworker, left the restaurant, and took the subway home, hoping the food wouldn't get too cold before he got there. The single father had valid reasons for taking the food. Josh's wife was the first woman to graduate from the city's fire station as a firefighter, earning the respect of her superiors in an environment dominated by men. Her father, a decorated high-ranking firefighter, influenced her. To the family's dismay, the woman died years earlier during the most difficult mission of her life. The commercial gallery fire spread so quickly that it collapsed 2 buildings, shocking the city's residents. Rose Clark was among the first to arrive at the fire station after receiving word that the gallery was on fire in order to save as many people as possible. And it was only because of her decisive and courageous actions that the number of victims was kept to a minimum. Unfortunately, Rose could not save herself on her last ascent up the building stairs and became trapped on one of the burning floors, leaving behind her husband, Josh, and their 2 children. Josh felt trapped in a nightmare during the funeral and the months that followed. While grieving his widowhood, he had to care for his children on his own, who were also bereaved by the death of their mother. Josh needed to be strong and hopeful for his children, but the moment they fell asleep, he sank into dark thoughts. It took him about a year to adjust and gradually try to resume his life. After all, his children were counting on him. Watson and Frank were 2 years apart in age, so they got along well and could look after each other if necessary. Josh could leave the children at home alone when he needed to go to work because they were 8 and 10 years old. On Sundays, the children were cared for by the neighbors, but Josh did not feel comfortable asking for help frequently. Josh moved from job to job in order to support his family, always hoping to find a better position. Despite his humble beginnings, he was always an enlightened and determined young man, the type of young man everyone looked up to and predicted would have a bright future. Josh received a scholarship to study administration at one of the country's largest colleges because of his high school grades and commitment. This young man was ecstatic, and it appeared that this was the start of a new chapter in his professional life. But it all came crashing down when Watson, his first child, was born. Being from a low-income family with no one to turn to for help and support, Josh was forced to drop out of college and begin working to cover the newborn's expenses. At the time, his wife's dream of becoming a firefighter was only a pipe dream. Josh found work as a pizza delivery guy, doorman, and gas station attendant after overcoming his grief for a year. However, each position had its drawbacks. Either the pay was too low or the working conditions were intolerable. And just when Josh had given up hope of finding a suitable position, fortune smiled on him. He found a job that paid slightly more than his previous ones, and the promising young man was hired immediately following an interview with the restaurant's director, a senior businessman. To Josh's surprise, doing the dishes in the restaurant was not as difficult as it appeared at first, but the rest of the cleaning was a nightmare. It never occurred to him that a large facility like that required its floors to be washed daily, with the exception of the staff bathroom, which was still filthy no matter what he did. Josh's heart pounded with joy as he approached his house and saw the light in the windows. "You're still awake, my boys?" smiled the man. When he opened the door, he was greeted by Watson and Frank, who ran to hug him and tell him about their day. "Daddy, Daddy, Frank is experiencing chest pains again. He asked me to not tell you anything, but he was sobbing uncontrollably," Watson said, his face flushed with guilt. Josh pressed his lips together and looked anxiously at his eldest son. Frank suffered from a heart condition that left him in pain for several months. During a routine checkup, he discovered that his son had developed a dangerous situation a year before. At the appointment, the cardiologist looked down and told Josh that the boy needed heart surgery. "Look, I know your story, Josh. Everyone around here knows what happened to your wife, so I must warn you that this treatment is quite expensive. You need to prepare yourself for it. The surgery should cost a little over $12,000, plus post-op medicine," said the doctor, handing out a piece of paper with the address of the hospital that could provide the surgery. Josh left the doctor's office knowing that he needed to find the money for Frank's surgery as soon as possible. After all, his firstborn's life was at stake. By doing the math at home, Josh found that raising the money for the surgery would require 2 years of savings and a lot of financial discipline. That waiting time would be even shorter if he could take meals home from the restaurant more frequently. It wasn't such an absurd sum, the man reasoned, but Frank's constant pain was becoming unbearable, and the widowed father was unsure how much longer he could bear it. Josh placed the restaurant food plates on the table for his children to eat before heading to the bathroom for a well-deserved shower. Sure enough, the next day would be filled with dirty dishes and cleaning. The next day, however, when Josh arrived at the restaurant, Chef Edwards was waiting for him with a not-so-polite conversation in front of all the other employees. "I know you took the leftover food home last night. Do you think I'm stupid? That you could steal the food I made so easily? Shame on you, slacker. My recipes are not suitable for a cleaner. You'd better start understanding your position in this place, because the next time you'll be on the street without a second thought." Chef Edwards said this while throwing empty plates on the floor and ordering Josh to clean up the mess. Josh fought hard not to react or respond to the insults. He wasn't the type to back down from a fight, but he had no choice because he was afraid of losing his job. If he was fired, he would be unable to pay his rent, let alone his son's surgery. However, Josh felt compelled to take the risk of taking the leftover food home, so he began to exercise greater caution. Every day, he hoped that customers would return some orders so that he could take them home and feed his children again. They sent dishes back to the kitchen every day, much to Josh's delight, for about a month until the new restaurant director asked a cleaner to come to her office. Olivia Thompson was a 35-year-old businesswoman who made it a point to keep everything under her personal control. She knew the worth of every dollar she earned and had been devoted to her company since taking it over. Olivia decided to install security cameras in the restaurant on a non-business day to figure out why the establishment was losing money. For obvious reasons, she did not inform any of her employees. Olivia started asking questions as soon as she saw the terrified cleaner in her office. "I have one question for you, Mr. Josh. What were you carrying when you left the restaurant last night?" Remember that everything is recorded on video, so lying is not an option. After hearing the restaurant owner's words, Josh felt terrified and helpless. He finally gathered himself and muttered, "I apologize, ma'am. I had some kitchen leftovers in my purse. The food that customers had returned to the kitchen and was meant to be thrown away." Olivia looked at the young man, sighed, and shifted her expression from rage to compassion, asking, "Did you feed them to your dog or to a beggar?" Josh's eyes welled up with tears as he revealed the truth to the restaurant owner. Although she was not easily moved, the idea that someone in the 21st century would have to feed their children restaurant leftovers seemed incomprehensible to the businesswoman. But what she later discovered turned her life upside down. "To be honest, I didn't have a choice. My wife was a firefighter who died on the scene of a major city fire, and my oldest son has a heart condition. He requires surgery, so I must save every penny I can," the young man added, wiping away tears. Olivia looked surprised at the young cleaner and then asked an odd question. "You stated that your wife was a firefighter who died in the city fire. Is this correct? Is that correct?" inquired the woman. Yes, her name was Rose Clark, ma'am, and she was the first woman in the fire department to arrive at the gallery that day. Olivia sighed and sank into her chair, rubbing her eyes with her fingers. Her face expressed genuine concern, which made Josh have an anxiety attack. And when the businesswoman finally put herself together, she explained. It all started a few years ago when her mother passed away after a years-long fight against cancer. Olivia's father did not cope well with the loss, and his health and mobility deteriorated, forcing the elderly man to be confined in a wheelchair and rely on someone 24 hours a day. Olivia then hired a caregiver for her father, and in order to preserve his legacy, Olivia took over the restaurants of that seasoned businessman. She adored her father and considered losing him to be her worst nightmare, so she made it a point to consult with him before making any decisions and considered the older man to be her mentor. But it was on August 13th that Olivia's heart almost stopped. This was due to her father receiving treatment at a clinic within a shopping mall, the same one that caught fire, and an appointment with him was scheduled at the time of the fire. The older man's caretaker died trapped in the debris, but Olivia's father was miraculously saved. From that day forward, the elderly man insisted that a real angel had saved him. He kept saying that a firefighter rescued him from the flames by throwing him onto a trampoline meters below. It all happened so quickly that he didn't even have time to ask her name before she ran back into the flames to help others. Olivia had no idea if the woman who had saved her father was Josh's wife as she stood next to the young widower, but it didn't matter. She felt compelled to help his sick son in order to repay the efforts of that woman who died saving lives. Shaking Josh's hand, the businesswoman expressed her willingness to assist him. At the same time, Olivia saw an opportunity to gain someone's trust and use it to her advantage. She stated she was suspicious of Chef Edwards and asked Josh to keep an eye on him and report any unusual behavior. The man, who was always very perceptive, agreed. After all, his relationship with Chef Edwards had deteriorated dramatically. Josh overheard the chef's phone conversations for 2 weeks and even followed him when he received goods in the back of the restaurant. He quickly connected the dots and figured out everything. The chef had a supplier who was a friend of his and overpriced all the ingredients and spices. In this manner, he would purchase inferior and even more expensive goods than usual, diverting all the money into his pocket. Customers returned much more food to the kitchen than usual because the food quality was below that of a 5-star restaurant. Josh's information was proven true after further investigation by Olivia and her lawyers, and Chef Edwards was immediately fired and sued. However, Olivia also heard Josh's suggestions for cutting costs and improving service quality, which he had had since starting working there, but had no one to discuss with. Olivia called one of the best heart surgeons in town the same week. She transferred the entire cost of the surgery at once and requested the highest level of urgency in the case. She then called Josh to inform him of the situation. "Hey man, rejoice. Your son will live to see the bright future that his father has planned for him. Tell him that as long as you return to college, you will be the new manager of this unit you spent months cleaning." Now, I'm curious to see if customers will continue to return intact dishes to the kitchen. Josh didn't know whether to cry or laugh and could only thank God for the blessing of meeting that woman in his life. Finally, he hung up the phone and sobbed as he hugged his children. The boy recovered quickly after surgery, surprising even the doctors. Olivia and Josh maintained contact after work meetings, allowing Josh to introduce her to his children. Then when Olivia's father heard that the new restaurant manager was doubling the company's profits in a matter of months, he wanted to meet him. They met and chatted while taking a walk in the park. The former cleaner then took a photograph of his late wife from his wallet and showed it to the older man. The old man, paralyzed and with watery eyes, simply says, "My angel, my angel." If you like this story, I ask you to please leave a like, and this other video appearing on the screen will probably move you as well. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video.